I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and this is a whole bunch of EPZ earphones. So every once in a while I notice a trend in people asking me to review a particular earphone. In this case, it was like a whole brand of earphones, EPZ. So I decided to check them out, and thankfully EPZ was actually kind enough to send me a little smorgasbord, a little mini smorgasbord. So this is 3 of their IEMs ranging in different price ranges, and we'll talk about each of them and I'll give them each a score, but also kind of just using this as a little bit of an introduction to EPZ, which I don't know if they're actually a new brand, if they're just new to me, new to all you. I'm not sure exactly. They are definitely new to me. And it seems like they're a new brand with a pretty surprisingly wide product category, product catalog. So anyway, without further ado, this is the EPZ G10, this is the Q5, and then over here is the K5. And they are all different prices, and we will start from the cheapest and move up to the more expensive ones. So here with the G10, all right? Price range on this one is about $60. It's a single dynamic driver IEM, and they're calling it perfect for gamers. What does that mean exactly? I don't know, man. I'm not really into the gaming IEM thing. So I apologize if this is an IEM for gamers and I'm not a gamer. I mean, kind of was a gamer at one point in my life, but anyway, I digress. I'm mostly reviewing this from the perspective of listening to music, which is what I typically do. Yeah, again, price range is 60 bucks. And this one actually came with kind of an interesting selection of accessories. So this was the accessory pouch that it came with, a little carrying pouch, and then it also came with I believe this is a TRRS splitter. I haven't even actually used this, but ostensibly you could, because this thing, oh, this is why this thing's for gamers. Now I figured it out. This thing has a mic, an inline mic on the cable, as you can see here, as well as a TRRS connector over there. So you can plug that thing into here, and then if you wanted to, you could run this cable into, let's say, your phone, your gaming PC, whatever, and then this cable you could run into the microphone import or input, assuming that they are separate, which they certainly aren't always separate. But anyway, it was kind of neat that it came with that. The other thing that it came with, which really surprised me, is this, a flashlight. I don't know, gamers don't need flashlights, do they? Maybe they do. Maybe they're saying something like open your windows, and that's the wrong camera. But yeah, just interesting set of accessories that we will at least leave on display there. Of course, they come with the requisite, multiple sets of ear tips, but I won't dig into that too much right now because the focus is for sure here on the IEM. All right. So let's talk about the physical stuff on the IEM itself. The shell shape I would describe as kind of a semi-custom design. Let's see if we can scroll around to the back over here, and you can see that it is fitted a little bit. There's a little bit of a wing here, but it's not too aggressive. I find that the fit on this is generally pretty comfortable. I would say this is actually probably the best fitting of the 3 IEMs here for my ear. It's just, a nice, easy fit, fairly shallow fit, and it is, the shell's not see-through, and it feels, I don't know, somewhat solid. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going there with that, but let me go ahead and give you a fit demonstration so you can take a look at what this thing looks like in my ear. All right. So yeah, I would say actually a very comfortable fit. Again, I would say this is probably the best fitting of the 3, certainly for my ear. And it's a decent looking IEM, although I do think that they went a little overboard with the branding. Like, go with the G or go with the EPZ. Doing both of them in one ear does feel a little bit overkill for my tastes. Yeah, I guess we could also talk about the cable for a little bit. And this cable, honestly, all these cables are kind of like the same in that they are decent, but as you can see, a little bit memory prone, a little bit kink prone, and a little bit on the stiff side. This one also has the aforementioned microphone, inline microphone, which I'm personally actually not a big fan of, but obviously if you are looking for an IEM with a microphone in it, well, you're going to be a big fan of having a microphone. I didn't test it, but usually these things actually sound surprisingly decent, especially when you compare them to like microphones that have noise canceling. Now there's not going to be any noise canceling on that microphone because it is just a cheap little microphone on a cable, but probably will do the job, I guess. Again, not usually what I'm evaluating. What I am usually evaluating is the sound specifically for music. And well, let's talk about the sound here on the EPZ G10. You're going to notice a trend here as I go through the frequency response of all these IEMs and talk about what they sound like, is that I think all 3 of these IEMs you could bucket into the realm of like a V-shaped sound signature that is erring on the side of bright, okay? Which is to say there's kind of a lot of treble on this guy. And this is the frequency response as graphed here of the G10. It's actually a pretty honestly attractive frequency response. It's maybe a little bit thin here in the mids is what you would expect of a V-shaped sound signature, but you've got a nice modest little bass boost. It's not overwhelmingly bassy. It's just kind of like, it's got a little bit of a bass boost to it. So it's got a kick in there. And then up here in the treble region, you can see that it's a little elevated, and that is contributing to sort of that bright V-shaped sound signature that I alluded to. And possibly, again, like I'm not really a big IEMs for gamers kind of guy, but possibly this brighter tuning here could actually be a benefit to people who are trying to hear higher frequency tones in their games. I don't know, what is that what you're trying to hear? Maybe. It does exaggerate the spatialness a little bit. It gives you maybe a little bit better sense of 3D position when you have kind of that elevation in the treble, at least versus not having that elevation. But yeah, anyway, that's the general sound signature. To my ear, I would describe the sound here on the G10 as a little bit thin and shrill. The bass of the three, it's fairly sub-bass focused. It's not bloaty or boomy or anything like that, but I would say it is probably the least defined of the three. And yeah, I don't know, it's a decent sound. It's not an awful sound, but it's just kind of decent. I wouldn't say it's like super competitive at 60 bucks. There's a lot of really good stuff out there at around 50 to 60 bucks. Personal preferences, like in this price range, I would still go for something like the Moondrop Lan. But that's going to be a lot less bass and maybe less exciting depending on what you're into. So you might prefer this, but for me personally, this is a decent little IEM. We'll give it a solid 3 stars out of 5. And yeah, if you want to check it out, I do have that linked down below, but that will not be the only IEM that we review here because we've got a couple of others that I got to pull into view. And we will move next onto the Q5. And I don't know exactly what's up with this naming scheme. It's got the G10, the Q5, and the K5. The number doesn't seem to correlate with anything that I can tell. But this is actually a little bit more different than the other two. The price range, it's smack dab in the middle. It's 80 bucks. It's also a single dynamic driver, like the last one we just looked at. But physical form factor, this one's actually a little bit different. I mean, one, you might notice that it actually kind of looks like a ripoff of the Meze Advar. Interesting choice. But apart from that, there's actually more, which we'll dig into in a little bit. Or is there anything else to talk about? No, there's not. The other difference is that this one is on an MMCX connector, whereas the other two are on 2-pin connectors. So obviously you can still swap the cable. You just couldn't swap this with other EPZ earphones, at least not the ones I've got. And it does mean that it rotates a little bit on the cable, although it's a nice stiff rotation, which means it should hold its position, which I like. And yeah, it does have, again, kind of that butthole design from the Meze Advar. You know, it's an attractive look, so I guess I understand why they wanted it, but it is such a obvious clone of the Meze Advar. It's a little bit questionable. Fit wise, all right, let's do a little fit demonstration so you can see this. This one actually fits pretty well in my ear as well. It's got kind of like that bean shaped fit of like a Shure IEM or something like that. So it just nestles in there. The angle on the nozzle is quite good for me. And as you can see, it's pretty compact and surprisingly actually really secure fitting IEM. There is a little bit of squishiness, and I don't know if that's driver flex exactly or what's going on there, but there's a little bit of squish that I'm hearing in my ear as I move that around. So yeah, I don't know, decent build quality on this guy. The cable is, I would say, similarly, oh well, I think this is probably the exact same cable that was on the G10. So as you can see, it is a little memory prone, a little bit stiff, a little bit kinky. I know the difference here is that they've got gold hardware. They've got the rose gold instead of just the silver. But I digress. Let's talk about the sound here on the Q5. And well, like I kind of alluded to earlier, these things are all kind of have a similar bright V-shaped sound signature. Let's go over here to squig.link, and all these frequency responses are on squig.link if you want to check them out. Let's pull up the Q5 so you can take a look. Again, looking pretty similar. In fact, I would say this is even more elevated here in the treble region, but a similar level of bass, similar thinness here in the mid-range. It's just got more treble. Now, the effect of having more treble, it's going to make things sound brighter. It's going to make things sound maybe more detailed, I suppose. I don't know, a little bit sharper. What I really found, honestly, is that it actually contributed to the bass sounding a little bit better defined than it did on the G10. Again, it's similar levels, but the just like kind of like initial bass impact here on the Q5 sounded a little bit tighter, which was nice. That said, this one was also, I would say, significantly worse with sibilants, okay? So if you're listening to music that has like harsh S's in the recording, and even just me saying sibilants and saying S's can potentially elicit a sibilance event in your earphones or headphone. This one, because of that extra brightness, is, I would say, worse with that. And in fact, it was the worst of the bunch. And in fact, honestly, I don't know, in my opinion, I think the treble on this guy is it's just too much. It's a bit of a no-go for me. It's like, it's fine, it's serviceable IEM, you could listen to it, and depending on what you're listening to, might not have any problems with it. But for me, it's just like, it's a little bit too on the edge. So I don't know, out of 5 stars, the Q5, I'm gonna give it just 2, I think, for 80 bucks. There's a lot of stuff out there that I would personally get otherwise. I did forget to talk about this real quickly. It does come with a nicer carry case, which is nice. And it came with a microfiber towel and, of course, a selection of ear tips. But neither here nor there for now, because we're moving on to our third and final EPZ earphone. This here is the K5. This is the most expensive of the bunch. And before I forget, here is the case that it comes with. One thing that's different about this, the K5 versus the Q5, in terms of accessories, is that it has swappable terminations. So if I punch it on this, you can see that the bottom of the cable will pop off. You can make that a balanced IEM if you want it to. I think it's personally not worth the effort, but a lot of people like that kind of stuff. So it's in there, and that is actually kind of nice for you. And then also, you know, the termination does get a little bit on the chonky side, but it's not awful. I don't know. I tend to prefer a smaller termination, so that's why I don't really like having the swappable stuff. But anyway, I did kind of skip over the price on the K5 here. This one's $170, and it's also different from the other two, not just in terms of price, but also in terms of driver configuration. This one's actually a hybrid. It is one dynamic driver for the bass, as well as, I believe, 4 balanced armatures for the rest of the sound signature. Now, physical-wise, it's also a little bit different in that it is quite pink. And honestly, I kind of like the look of the plastic, or like this resin print. It looks pretty nice. Like, it's nice and solid. It's clear, it's see-through, and I like the way that it bends light. I dig that. You know, the outer panel on here, I'm less excited about. It just kind of looks, honestly, it's like a little bit too dark to even really tell what's going on. It's maybe a little bit messy, but if it was a little bit brighter, I might dig that, especially given how bright the rest of the IEM is. And then the other thing to talk about the build on this thing is that shape-wise, so this is a semi-custom, but one thing might be standing out to you, certainly stands out to me, is that the nozzle on this guy is quite long. You might want to consider a smaller, like kind of a shorter stem on your ear tip. Honestly, I did spend pretty much all the time listening to this with the stock ear tips, but you know, if you're trying to optimize this for the long term, I would certainly consider that. And I would also, I guess, give you a bit of a fit demonstration in my ear so you can take a look. But you'll probably also see that it sticks out a little bit here. And I think if I was using a shorter ear tip, I wouldn't so much have that problem. But yeah, that is the EPZ K5 in my ear. It's a decently fitting IEM. This one probably isolates the most of the bunch if that's what you're after. And part of that's just because of the deeper fit as well as the thicker solid build. Yeah, the sound isolation on that is actually pretty noticeable. So not necessarily a priority for me. I know it matters to some people. For me, kind of, I'll take anything if I'm honest. But yeah, that is the physical stuff here on the EPZ K5. Sound signature wise, that's right, you guessed it. This is a bright V-shaped sound signature. I would describe this one as a little bit more tasteful in its tuning, and comparatively, something like that. I would say this one's a little bit more balanced than the other two. Let me pull up the frequency response real quick. And again, all these are on squig.link. So this is the frequency response of the K5. This one's a little bit, you can see meteor here in the bass. The bass doesn't, well, this dip below in the mid-range does still give you kind of that V-shaped, you know, chasm there, which will contribute to that contrast, but it's rising up a little bit earlier, so it's going to give you that meteor bass. I think that the treble is tuned a little bit better, although it's still, again, definitely bright here on the K5. And then a thing that shows up in the graphs that I don't necessarily notice when listening, but it does look like the upper treble actually rolls off a little bit more, which is interesting because, well, this is the one that's got 4 balanced armatures in there. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I would actually say this is my favorite sounding of the 3. And I will jump to my notes real quick just to remind myself. Again, I would still describe this one as a bright V. It's just being a little bit more balanced than the other 2. I think because the brightness is a little bit better balanced out with that meteor low end that you get here on the K5. The bass is honestly pretty satisfying. I was listening to Men I Trust's Enclave Jazz as an album. It's a really good album, but it can be a little bit on the thin side, and some albums are just kind of recorded like that, but the bass emphasis you get here in the K5 is actually a pretty nice compliment to that album. So I dig that. It was boosted and it had, you know, a good amount of bounce to it without it necessarily being, you know, muddy. So I dig that. I would say generally the tuning, it just favors clarity though. It's still pretty hot in the treble. S's are not quite like super sibilant, but they are a little bit on the wet sounding side, which is like usually a sign of like it's on the verge of being a little bit overly sibilant, but there you go. So I would say it's not great with sibilants, but it's probably a little bit better than the other 2 here. And then the other thing that I'll describe is that the imaging on this guy was actually pretty decent. I wouldn't say it was outstanding, but at around, what is $170, I would say it's certainly competitive. In terms of imaging, it really is just going to come down to that sound signature, that tuning. Is that what you're after? And for me personally, I think this thing's decent at $170. Not my favorite IEM. I'll give it a solid 3 stars. And if you want to check out the EPZ K5 or any of the other IEMs I have talked about today, I've got them all linked in the description down below. Again, shout out to EPZ for sending these guys in for review. And yeah, while you're down there, look for those links. If you like this video, please do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Cheers.